medieval times, monasteries and castles had storehouses. Europeans had storehouses on their military ships, and so on. So these have been around for a long time. This is not a concept that we invented in the church, or Joseph Smith invented. Now, the first reference I found in the Bible was in Genesis, which we talked about last week. It said Melchizedek was the keeper of the storehouse of God. Genesis 41:56, I want to get into that here in a little bit more, but Joseph of Egypt, he was told, or he interpreted Pharaoh's dreams that during the 7 years of plenteous times that they should gather, so that the 7 years of famine they would have something to live on. So he, in essence, established a storehouse in ancient Egypt. And so in 41:56, Joseph opens the storehouses and sold unto the Egyptians. I want to come back to that. And then in Malachi, bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse. This is a chamber in the temple that was primarily meant at that time to support the Levites and the needy. So there are lots of references to this in ancient times, Old Testament, but what's the stance on it? This is kind of the same thing with the tithing. Well, these things were done in old. What's the stance on it today? Well, just like with tithing, where we're instructed to do that, we're also instructed to establish a storehouse. So, as we know, these things that were lost throughout time, scriptures that were lost, simple and plain meanings, the Book of Mormon, that were restored, tithing, storehouse, Melchizedek priesthood, all these things and more, all these things were restored. The Lord in essence is telling us, hold on, those things are not done away. I need you to pay attention to them. So I just did a word search on storehouse, and I found over 20 references to it in the Doctrine and Covenants. So a couple that I've highlighted here, and I know you're all familiar with these. But 42, it says, I'll just read it since. (42) 9b. Every man shall be made accountable unto me, a steward over his own property. We read this, I think, the first week. Over his own property, or that which he has received by consecration, inasmuch as sufficient for himself and family. And again, if there shall be properties in the hands of the church or any individual of it, more than is necessary for their support after this first consecration, which is a residue to be consecrated unto the bishop, and it shall be kept to administer unto those who have not from time to time, that every man who has need may be amply supplied and receive according to his wants. Therefore, the residue shall be kept in my storehouse to administer to the poor and the needy, and so on. So that's one. That's a big one. This whole section is all about it. Real quick, Albert, I got to hit one other topic. So,
well, I'm hoping it's 77, section 77, 1 C through G. For verily I say unto you, the time is coming, is now and at hand, and behold, and lo, it must needs be there be organization of my people in regulating and establishing the affairs of the storehouse for the poor of my people, both in this place and in the land of Zion, or in other words, the city of Enoch, for a permanent and everlasting establishment and order unto my church, to advance the cause which ye have espoused, and the salvation of man, to the glory of your Father who is in heaven, that ye may be equal in the bands of heavenly things, and earthly things also for the obtaining of heavenly things. For if ye are not equal in earthly things, ye cannot be equal in obtaining heavenly things. For if ye will that I give unto you a place of the celestial world, ye must prepare yourselves by doing the things which I have commanded you and required of you.
That's a good one. Yep, I hadn't called that one out. And I think we'll probably hit on that one a little bit more next week. I'll just give you a preview. Next week is All Things in Common. That's another section in Sister Wilkinson's book, and she had oodles of references in that on that topic. So that is where I was hoping we'll finish next week. We might bring up this one again, and probably a little recap of what we've talked about over the last month. But that's, yeah, thank you, Albert. Let me, in the last bit here, Brother Eddie.
I just wanted to circle back to that topic of inheritances.
Yes.
Since we're talking about the storehouse, on this sheet that you gave us, there it lists of how the surplus is used. It's for the building up of the storehouse, the laying of the foundation of Zion, the granting of inheritances, and I think that's tied also to the development of stewardships. And in section 150, we're kind of, the theme is we haven't really understood what we've been called to. There's a deeper call. You brought renewal to my church, but haven't fully grasped the vision of the building up of my kingdom. And then he kind of lays it out how that occurs. According to the law already given, adherence to the law of consecration is required alike of all those who gather. Many in times past have come to the center place to gather as such, should be considered so. They occupy a place in Zion. However, since laying all things before the bishop is a requirement of the gathering and consecration, compliance with that law is required. So as we understand the implications of consecration and the wholeness of our lives being dedicated to the Lord, including our temporalities, then that response being what we've talked about here, that we live beneath our means and we acquire a surplus and we dedicate that to the Lord. And the bishop has the responsibility over that storehouse, and that granting inheritances are to those who have also consecrated and gone through that process for the building up of their stewardships. As an ensign to the world and a demonstration that man can live together in peace and harmony with his neighbor, exercising stewardships, utilizing inheritances, and not being unduly influenced by Babylon, it's necessary to provide for close community living. And he finishes up, greater sacrifice and discipline than you have known before will be required for the work that truly lies ahead. So that idea of having a storehouse where there can be funds available to, for instance, someone who has gathered, who has gone through the consecration process and feels led that their special contribution is to be a baker, but don't have the means to start a bakery, would go to the bishop and, as he is led, grant that steward provisions to provide for a mixer, an oven, things that he would need to start a bakery. And in his prosperity, living beneath his means, he would in turn consecrate of his surplus back to the storehouse so that others may continue in that process of receiving inheritances and building up their stewardships.
That was 150 you were in? Yeah. Yeah, very good. Sometimes I think of the storehouse like a rain barrel. I've drawn a picture of this before. Think about it. The last thing I'll just touch on, I know my time's up, Sarah. Don't give me the hook yet. 2 minutes is, there's a scripture in Ecclesiastes that says there's nothing new under the sun. That which has already happened or that which will come has already happened before. times past. We have a spiritual or a precedent in Joseph of Egypt. If you go think about what happened there and what has been established again, it's a predictor of what's going to happen. But if you look at this chart I made up, of course, Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. I looked through what I think was Joseph Smith's patriarchal blessing. It does not say directly that he's Ephraim, but it did talk about the connection to Joseph of Egypt. But it seems like most church people think that Joseph Smith Jr. was of the tribe of Ephraim, which has a very specific role in latter days to do different things. They were both rejected and persecuted. Volume 6 of the church, Joseph talks a lot about the different persecutions that were faced, the different references there. They were both given the task of the storehouse. I just mentioned TNC 42 is all about the law of consecration, the establishment of storehouses, and caring for the poor and needy. They both are in charge or given task of distribution from the storehouse after it's been accumulated. If you just think about all the Joseph of Egypt, all the things that came into that storehouse, I don't exactly know if they freely gave that back out or how they distributed it, but I think there was definitely some multiplication of the increase. And then also we're given instruction that every man may improve upon his talent. They are both foreordained to their role. And there's some good scriptures there in 2 Nephi, which is in the Book of Mormon, but it's a reference to Joseph of Egypt and a prophecy he gave before he died, which it seems to be referring, from what I was able to research, to Joseph Smith coming. So there's a connection there. And then they both were involved with the gathering of the tribes of Israel. If you look at Genesis 50, one of my favorites about that story, Joseph, his brothers come in and says, what you thought evil for me that day, God meant to happen to save many lives. Well, if you think about it, all the tribes of Israel were restored and gathered in through Joseph of Egypt. If he had not been in place, that would not have happened there. And also, that's our calling now. So there's a lot of parallels between these two, obviously. And yet, and it's really a foreteller of what we are to do. So thank you for your participation. We got one more week on this. If you have her book, go into All Things Common. That's really where we're going to finish up. So God bless you all.